Now I'm looking at the correct screen. Cool. Hi again, Jess. Thank you. Thank you,
Hi,
Leanne.
guys.
Hi.
Really appreciate it. I appreciate you both for being here today. Let's just start with you, Jess. Can you just tell us a little bit about you, your background, your work? It was really hard for us to create like a one paragraph bio about you because you've composed for visual media. You tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, no, you guys did a great job. I struggle with the same thing. So yeah, I mean, I started off as a musician, and I did like national touring as a singer-songwriter for years, and I got into the TV and film world primarily just having lucked out. Like I rode that wave where like the quirky folk acoustic pop thing was doing really, really well, and I moved to LA, and I kind of realized I want to have a little more control over my career. So I taught myself how to record and produce, and I started landing a bunch of commercials and ads and different projects. And, I built my company around that. So I own a company called Revolver. That's my custom house. And where I'm at now is I'm the SVP of licensing strategy for all of Big Noise Music Group, which includes the custom house that I own and run. And they kind of approached me when they were a new music group and they wanted me to help out with licensing. And I came with my custom house. So as long as I'm with them, it's white labeled under their whole umbrella, and that I got to maintain being a creative exec, which means that I take a swing at the projects that I'm good at, and I hire a bunch of people on the ones that I'm not. And when I had a little more time with the pandemic, so I scored 2 seasons of an animated series for Hasbro called Pony Life. But I don't always have time to be able to do that. That was just because I was stuck at home and with all my toys, and the project came up, and I was like, oh, all right, I think I'll have time to do this. I'm not going to be jet setting. But yeah, I'm on the board of a bunch of different, organizations for songwriters, and advocacy is a really big part of what I do. Having been on the artist side, being a songwriter, composer, and then also being an executive, it's really important to me that, I give back and educate up and coming songwriters on, kind of how to navigate all of this. It's really difficult. And, a lot of the gateway deals that you find aren't necessarily in your favor. So, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And you mentioned before you're originally from New York, right?
Yes.
And you're in LA.
Yes. I moved out here for the TV, definitely for TV and film world. The live gigging scene in New York was fantastic, but all the studios are out here. It's just, it's just easier to kind of make connections. And when I knew I wanted to get into TV and film, it just felt like a better place for me to be.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Thank you again for joining.
Yeah.
Leanne.
Yeah. So I make video games. I've been making games for maybe 17 plus years now. So it's the, only career I've known is making games. I started off in sort of the indie scene in video games. So independent developer in the UK, which is where I'm originally from. And worked my way up through production, which is my craft discipline focus is production and producing games. And I've worked on games like Scrabble and Magic the Gathering, which is a big card game in America that we converted into a video game. And then for 7 or so years, I was heading up Need for Speed at Electronic Arts, which is a racing game, which I love because I also love cars as well. And that's where we met as well, Bruno.
Yes.
And then after Electronic Arts, I moved to Los Angeles and started working at Riot Games, which makes League of Legends. And right now I head up all of Riot's third-party publishing division, which is Riot Forge. And we are working with a variety of different developers all around the world to build story-driven single-player experiences, which is very different to League of Legends because that's a mass multiplayer competitive game. But Riot Forge is very much focused on building deep story-driven experiences for our players. So that's what I'm doing right now.
That's beautiful. Very, very beautiful. When you say like you worked on games, like, do you mean like you coded games? Like you were actually part of the...
No, I'm not a coder, but the producer's job is basically kind of like the glue or the, composer of the orchestra kind of thing. we make sure everybody's got what they need to do their job. We make sure that the vision is clear, that everyone's heading in the same direction. So my job for Riot Forge is I head up the entire label. So I am primarily accountable for our vision, our strategy, what we're trying to achieve, like all of our KPIs and our metrics. And then the other big piece I do is manage our entire portfolio. So I decide which games we should be making, like who is that target audience, which developers should we work with, and then I lead the entire team to make sure that they're set up for success and that they've got everything that they need. So engineers, artists, designers, producers, brand managers, and I lead, you know, that entire team to make sure they can make great games.
Awesome. And I guess for both of you, how did you end up doing what you're doing today? What was the spark, the start like?
Do you want to go, Jess?
Sure. You know, when I was a kid, I had a Muppet Babies keyboard, and I used to watch cartoons and mute them and like play these things to it. And I kind of like, none of my family were artists, so like I've ended up where I think I've always meant to be. Like I did the artist thing for years because I loved music so much that I just like picked up a guitar and started singing and playing and had some success with managers and different labels. And I never knew that I could write songs for other people for a living. I never knew that I could compose for, like, I didn't realize how that planet worked. And so I came about it in a very circuitous like way. But, you know, I've always just loved storytelling. Like I've always loved how all the pieces come together. Like, and you know, there's so many elements that go into like, you know, a video game with all the stories and like, you know, but like, you know, a film and ads and like, you know, there's like the people that write the scripts, there's the, you know, cinematographers, there's the acting that's an art, you know. And for me, like, just like my voice was always just music and sound. And, you know, that was how I kind of saw and felt things and was able to translate how I was feeling in story. And so, you know, I feel like it's, like I said, it's been a long route to get here. And I'm like, oh yes, this is the thing, you know. But it did start with that Muppet Babies keyboard that I brought to college. I covered it with red nail polish so people wouldn't know it was my Muppet Babies keyboard as a kid. But yeah, just storytelling for me has just always been sonic, you know, and collaborating has always been part of band world for me and, you know, artist world. So
Awesome. Do you see yourself working in anything other than music?
yeah, I mean, recently I've been getting more into like, you know, like I've been asked to work on some show development ideas and stuff like that, primarily music driven series, because a lot of the stuff that I ended up getting into are music driven series where I'm writing full songs and lyrics and we're really driving story. So, you know, at a certain level, and I don't know, LIANNE, this is your experience, like as you move up where you said you're orchestrating the whole thing, like you get to a point where like you are running teams. Like if I am doing the music for a whole series, like if I'm not composing, I'm overlooking the composer. If I'm working with songs, I'm working with other producers and singers. And, you know, it's kind of like graduating to that next point where, you know, I want to be able to tell the story on a larger level, you know, and not just the music component, you know. So yeah, and this year it's been a lot more about, I've had some amazing opportunities to work with some amazing writers to develop some content that I'm, you know, I can't talk about, but I'm pretty excited about.
Awesome. How about you?
Yeah, mine is quite similar. Definitely knew from a very young age that I wanted to make video games, and played games very, very young. One of the games that really made me think about doing this for a career was Streets of Rage. The very, very original, not the one that came out recently, but, you know, in the 80s. So that game was just a fundamental moment in my life when I realized that I wanted to do something that brought that kind of joy to people that I got from that experience, you know, that creativity and how I connected to those characters in the game and how I wanted to be, you know, part of their world and that world, and the experiences that I had playing that game with my friends and how it like brings you closer together, especially in that moments where you need it, like growing up and needing that connection. So I just always loved playing games. It was a way that me and my friends would get together and spend time together and bring happiness, you know, when maybe other things in your life aren't quite going how you want them to be. And the game is just you know, I don't want to use the word escape because that sounds negative, but it's an escape in the sense that it's a different form of creativity. Like it's a different world that you can immerse yourself into. And I love that feeling. I love the joy that it brought me. And so I knew from a very early age that I wanted to do that, and I wanted to create games that make people happy and are a, you know, important part of people's lives. And being able to, you know, be the one that helps create something like that is definitely the thing that keeps me making games every day.
Very powerful, both of you. I will start pulling questions from here. There were two people that asked kind of the same question, so I'm going to combine them, since both of you are advocates for, you know, like women in music and women in games. This is from João Carreno and Emma Bellegarde. What was the hardest part of getting into these industries as females? And did you face any prejudice during the construction of your careers? And if you have any advice on how to deal with that, if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I can go if you like. The video game industry is primarily men, for sure. And, you know, in the 17 plus years I've been doing it, it's absolutely, you know, improved over time. You know, when I first joined the industry, I think I was the only female in a studio of, you know, 80 people. So it was very uncommon, you know, to have women making games back then. I think one of the things that has kept me going is perseverance. Like that's something that's a, you know, a value to me, and something that I, you know, continue to remind myself whenever like something doesn't go quite right, or, you know, you experience some form of sexism, because that definitely happens in the games industry. You know, I think I've definitely experienced a lot of those things in my career, and I think it's important for, you know, women like Jess and myself to persevere and to show why we're here and the value that we provide, and make that space for other women. Like, we're the ones that are forging that path, right? We have to overcome the challenges and the obstacles, because if we overcome them, then women that come after us don't have to deal with those things as much. And that's how I always, you know, think about being a woman in the games industry. If I can just make it a little bit easier for other women to make games and to provide that creativity and their skill set into something that they're passionate about, then I feel like I've, you know, at least done my job and helped a little bit in that space, which is why I'm, you know, Women in Games advocate. I'm super passionate about this space. My team at Riot, the unit that I oversee, is half women, which I'm extremely proud about. It's something that's very, very dear to me and very important to me, that we get more women making games, because at the end of the day, the gaming demographic is 50-50. You know, in the world, gamers are 50% men, 50% women, non-binary. And so we have to be the ones making those games for those people. You know, if all men make games for women and non-binary, you're just not going to get the type of games, because you need different perspectives. So that's really important to me. So yeah, I would say perseverance. Think about, you know, the end goal, which is, as we overcome these challenges, they become less and less for the women that come after us.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I would have to agree. I mean, I would agree right second pretty much everything that LIANNE said. Like, you know, like it is perseverance, and it is also like, you know, leaving a door open. Like it, I don't know about how it is in the gaming world, but like in the music planet, it is very much like people think that you pay your dues and then you pay forward paying dues. And I think that you definitely need to like command excellence. Like, I'm tough. Like, it has to, it buck stops with me. Like, I'm not going to give anybody who's not ready an opportunity, but I am going to give people access and, you know, maybe a little bit of coaching if I can see that, you know, I am sitting there and there, you know, they're not a lot of women represent 1% of the people earning the top dollars in music. So, you know, I've experienced a lot of that as a woman who has a studio. People would book my studio and come in and be like, whose guitars are these? Like, they couldn't fathom that, you know, I was a guitar player, or I play a show, and the number one thing they'd say afterwards was, oh, you actually play the guitar, you know? And so it's like, you see it, you know, and I think the thing is like, and this is like LIANNE, like why, like, I love what you're doing, you know, fangirling out by like paying it forward. And like I've been trying, you know, to do that with the way I build up my teams and the people that I hire as well, because it is perseverance. But I also understand, like, I am a ballsy alpha female, so I can kind of like, my skin's maybe a little bit tougher, you know, and I've been able to elbow in or be charming in a way or be a little tomboyish because I also play soccer and sports. Like, I've been able to kind of work, you know. And you know, one thing I did do when I set up my company was no one wanted to hire me to score, to work on their commercials, to produce anything, because they Googled me and I was a singer-songwriter, a folk singer. And they would say, hey, when I need a ukulele player, which I didn't even really play, they boxed me into being like, oh, I need a quirky folk singer. So what I did with my company was I changed it so that even now my email is JD. I don't put my name. And what I had to do to establish my company was to basically call all my credits under my company, Sound Revolver. And I took my ego out of it, and I got enough credits under my belt that like now I am at a point where I can be like, I scored this. I actually was the executive director. And I have been passed over for titles because people above will look and be like, oh, is she really running the, you know, I've definitely executive directed, music directed a bunch more projects than I got credit for. So, you know, that part is frustrating. But again, like, I think the other part, it's perseverance, but I gotta say it's also humor, because we're making art, like, and that's the other part too. And I know it's so personal and there's so many people that, like, you're right, like, do get frustrated with it. But like, you know, when we mess up, someone doesn't die on an operating table, like, you know, I always think of that worst case scenario, and like, it hurts, your ego hurts, but the more you put yourself out there, the more you kind of like just kind of get used to it a little bit. And, you know, humor, like, you know, no one wants to work with someone who's bitter and angry. Like, it just is not a good vibe. And, you know, maintaining that sense of humor, like, even when like you get horrible criticism back or something else, and you wake up the next day and you're like, all right, I'm going to take the criticism. Where did it come from? Can I use this to make myself better? Or am I just trying to do a style that's not my style? Or am I trying to write in a way that's not working for me? But yeah, humor. That's for me, it's humor and perseverance. And then, yeah, leaving that door wide open. I look around and it's like, actually, it's funny because LIANNE, we messaged each other on LinkedIn, and, you know, I'd noticed she was part of this women's organization, and I introduced her to a different women's organization. Like, it's important to like make those connections so that women see each other in these spaces and then hold each other accountable and say, okay, like, look at your team. Like, how many people are you actually like hiring, you know, that are more representative of where you're at? And unfortunately, it's not that women are less talented. It's just that when you're given less opportunity, it is harder to find a certain level of quality, because I think a lot of women also don't see themselves. And LIANNE, I don't know if you experienced this. I think a lot of women don't see themselves represented in these upper levels. And, you know, they either stop trying, or, you know, they do kind of not have that alpha female kind of vibe where they're going to push through. But, you know, there are people like LIANNE and there are people like me. You just have to like find a community, like Google, find women in anything. I always try to be part of, like, find your tribe, and that tribe wants to keep hiring. And like, that's how we make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. And also there's that classic thing where women won't apply for an opportunity unless they're 100% qualified, but other people apply 60-70% when they hit those qualifications.
Yep.
So I think, to Jess's point, it's like really believing in yourself and like taking that extra leap, right? And I think it's scary and there's a lot of risk there, but I would definitely recommend, you know, more women to just put themselves out there and be okay with the criticism or the no's or the, you know, failures, because failures literally make us who we are, and we will never be successful if we don't fail. And that leads me to my last point, which Jess kind of touched on as well. I think it's really about just not taking things personally, because it never is. That is definitely something I've learned in my career, and it's a really tough thing to learn, because especially when you're just starting out, it all feels personal when you're getting all this feedback and everything, but it's not personal. You know, they're either just looking for something different, they're looking for someone else. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or that feedback's directly to you. So, and even if it is, I would say don't take it personally, right? That's just something I try to live by.
No, 100%. And like, you know, I think also just because this is a music, you know, like podcast, but like video cast or whatever they would call this. You know, you have to remember, people always ask, they're like, you know, I've done like panels before where like it's musicians that are trying to get into TV and film writing or syncing for, you know, different types of media. And, you know, the minute you want to do what we do, it's not your project anymore. If you are precious about your art, this is not the path for you, because you are part of a team. There are so many people making creative decisions, and it's exactly what LIANNE said. Like, you can't take it personally, but you also have to think, do you want to work to notes? Are you cool walking in and understanding the end product might not look anything like what you started with? It's a different beast. It's really cool to get your music and see it, and you know, I'm sure you have your own art and you're like, can you visualize the way it's going to look? But there are a team of people who have opinions, and you know, and you have to consider their opinions, because it is a collaborative art. When you are licensing music or doing sound effects or sound design, this is what we both do is it's all collaborative. So yeah, it isn't personal, and you might not want notes, and then again, this isn't for you.
Yeah. Be open to feedback for sure.
Yeah.
All fantastic, beautiful. And it's also like one thing that both of you mentioned or touched on a little bit was it's almost like it goes back to the community, right? Like you build your community. So if you're a gamer, and if you're starting, and if you don't have any credits, or if you're building your brand, build a community of, you know, friends or women in games or women in music, and start from there. I thought it was really cool what you did, Jess, at the beginning of your career, creating this brand, having all the credits under this brand. This is really smart, really it's a strategy, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to, you know, like I can tell any artist this, but I use my name. Like, my brother is coming out with his record. He's like, what should I do? I'm like, don't use your name, because it's your name. You're going to have it forever. Like, people can find trails of things where I'm like, oh yes, regrettable. Like, you know, me playing at a cafe at Sundance, which is cool at Sundance, but you know, again, it's your name. And, you know, it is all brand. If you're an artist, it's a brand. And, you know, I think, yeah, like what helped me separate it was creating, you know, Sound Revolver. That to me was like the umbrella under which I wasn't being judged as a gender, or, you know, any of like my past music. You know, of course the credits, you're judged by the credits, but you're judged by your work. And that to me was something that was, you know, ultimately the thing that was most important, and is ultimately keeps getting me more work and building that community. And a lot of the opportunities I've gotten as an executive is it's the quality of work. And yeah, it is hard to not, you know, be judged based on like the face that you have, or the gender that you are, or the style, you know, that you know, are known for. So yeah, there are all these different ways to I mean, I don't know, LIANNE, how it goes in your planet, but like, there's just a billion little, you have to just find your in, you know?
There's a really amazing quote from a woman that she's a really big inspiration to me. Her name's Dawn Steele. She was the first woman to run a production film company. So she ran Paramount Production back in the 70s. Amazing woman. She won a Crystal Award and everything. She, from a production perspective, I really look up to her. Unfortunately, she's not with us anymore, but amazing woman. And she says, one of her quotes is, if you can't get in the front door, go through the back door. If you can't go in the back door, go through the window. And if you can't go through the window, like, find your way in. And I think it's so true, you know, especially when you might be different from a gender perspective, from a diversity perspective, and the way that you look may play a part. You just got to find your way in, because as soon as you get into Jess's point, your work speaks volumes, right? That's in this creative industry, games, music, TV, film, it's all about that work you produce and the quality and the value that you provide to the team. So try and find your way in, and tap into other people to find your way in as well, right? That, like the network thing we were talking about, is your community, your tribe. Use them to help get your way in as well.
Yeah, that's what you're 100. I mean, there's so many outlets that, like, whoever's watching this, like, you can't, like I said, Facebook groups, panels, like this. Like, I mean, I got my first agent. I spent the last, like, God, I come out to LA and I spent like money I didn't have to go to the Hollywood Film and TV thing. And I memorized all the panelists' faces. And I had CDs. This is like, God, a decade ago. But like, I had like my, you know, copies of my CDs. And I found, because I knew what agency I wanted to sign with. It was Secret Road at the time. And they represented all the best singer-songwriters. I'd done my homework. That's the other part. Do your homework. Don't just be like, help. I knew who I was looking for. and she grabbed my CD and she called me from the car, because they still played CDs back then, and put it in the car, and they signed me, and that gave me a huge, jump. But I did my work. I was like, I spent money where I knew that I'd have access to people, and I didn't just show up. I literally, like, the night before, just like looked at faces, looked at panelists, like I memorized what I could to just, I mean, so you can say I lucked out, but I also came prepared, and I knew what I was looking for, and I took those risks to find a window or back door, an alley, an alley entrance.
Small tiny hole.
A small tiny hole, yes.
Nice. Well, there's a question here. I don't see the name. I think it's from Josh Parkman. I consider myself, I don't think it's from Josh, but anyway, I consider myself to be an entrepreneur. I work in music, and I have many ideas that require money and a team to make it work. What would be your suggestion on where to start? For both of you, because I think it works for both worlds, as an indie game developer, an indie entrepreneur in music.
I mean, I'm part of a bunch of nerdy groups, guys. Like, I mean, I have a mastermind group where we hold each other accountable. Like, I have a friend, this is like, you're seeing part of my home studio right now, where we do admin accountability hangs, where we work, like, it's called working on your business as opposed to just in it, right? And we come together and we have ideas, and we like give each other panels and education, like, and then enlist people, friends that are like-minded to you. If it's that early of a stage where you have ideas, and you kind of then put yourself around people that are in the same space, and then you guys will challenge each other to hone in. I'm sure Leanne feels the same way about this. Like, there's so many steps that get you from the idea to where we have to end up, and it really is just consistency. It's consistency, and it's a bit of humility, like surrounding yourself with people who are better than I hire people all the time that are better than me, all the time. You have to, right? Think about it. Like,
yeah,
if I had to do it all myself,
one person can't do everything, right? So
no.
You have to. Yeah, and I would say, really ask for that feedback. I think sometimes it's really hard to like put yourself out onto the table and say, what do you think about my idea? What do you think about my music? What do you think about my game? But you have to do that. You have to ask, as many like-minded people and different perspectives what they think about your idea, and give real, honest, harsh feedback, because that's the only way that you're going to make it better, and iterate on it. It's like, the definition of success is fail and iterate, fail, iterate, fail, iterate. And at the end, that's where success comes from. Like, you have to go through that process. Everybody that's ever been successful has been through that failure and iteration process. And one of the ways to fail is by getting feedback, because then you know where you're not doing well and where you could do better and what is actually working. So I think that's really important part of it as well. Like putting yourself out there and getting that feedback from people. And if you're really just starting out, I think it's also about finding people that have the same passion as you. Because if you can get 2 or 3 people together that have the same passion as you and want the same thing, then you're going to get together as a group and you're going to make that thing. When I think about it from a games perspective, when you have that, nugget of an idea and you come together with 2 or 3 other people, you can easily get a demo together in, some amount of time with 3 passionate people. And at the end, you've got this demo that shows, what you want to achieve. And I'm sure it's the same with music, where, on TV and film, it's the sooner you can come up with that tangible thing, whether it's a demo or something that someone can listen to or watch to show what the crux of your idea is, then you can get more and more people excited and passionate about it. And that's when you can start to build up that network.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. It's reaching out. Like, there's like, and I saw with the spreadsheet, Bruno, that you had, like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you have? Like, that's it. You're just looking and being like, oh, like, I don't know. I have so many cool people that I'm really good at filing people away. And then, like, you might not hear from me for a year or 2. And then I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I have this job for you. Or, hey, this thing popped up. Like, where did you end up? Like, like, you keep, like, it's like a really cool process where, like, you're right. Like with demos and, with music and you know, any of these creative ideas, like there has to be a product for TV and film. Product meaning a recording. You know, either you're going to program everything yourself, you're going to hire players. There's so many different pieces, or you need someone to pitch it. Like there's just a community of people that it's a symbiotic relationship, and I think that's the thing that people forget too. You think you have to do it all by yourself, and you know, there's a whole team of other people thinking they all have to do it by themselves. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
And in both industries, right? It's like they're people's businesses, right? Like gaming industry, the music industry is like it's made, you know, by people.
Yeah, there's humans at the center of it, right? And we are the ones that have like these creative ideas, and without people, you're not going to be able to do any of these things. So coming up with the idea is one thing, but actually finding the right people to make that idea a reality is definitely part of it, for sure. That's why I really focus on people that are passionate about the same thing as you. You know, when you go into a project or a team with all the same, you know, mindset around what you want to achieve, like that is indestructible. If you're all driven by the same core value and the same thing, like you can achieve anything.
There's another question here. It's more for you know, it's about games. How is a game born?
Wow.
What question? But like, would you be able to give like as a, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, the way that I always approach it, and I think it always starts with a vision. And for me, a vision comes from two different places. And this is just my approach and my personal perspective. But for me, a vision is either an opportunity or a problem. So you see a problem that players have in the world, you see a problem that, you know, fans of something are having, and you have a solution for that problem. Or you see an opportunity, like a gap that hasn't been fulfilled yet, you know, a game that hasn't been built yet, an experience that players haven't had yet. And that's an opportunity that you see to fill that gap. So for me, ideas come from those two places. They either come from you seeing a problem and you have a solution to that problem, or they come from you seeing an opportunity in the market, a space that isn't being fulfilled yet. And that normally comes naturally because we either experience the problem ourselves and we're like, oh God, I really hate it when that happens. I just wish da da da. And that's your idea, right? That's the thing, that's where it comes from. Or, oh, why isn't there a company doing X, Y, and Z? Like, why isn't there a game where I can sit there and do this and play this? And it's like, oh, okay, that's another idea. So I do think ideas are born from a personal experience in most cases of something that you want or that you see needs to be solved and needs to be fixed. And that's primarily, like from a Riot perspective on Forge, that's primarily where we come up with our ideas from, is where is there a gap right now? Like, what do our players want? And how do we fill that want? And that's kind of where the crux of the idea comes from. And then we look at a bunch of data to try and validate that idea, right? We're like, okay, I think this is a problem. I'm feeling it. I think this is the solution. Now let's try and validate that this is actually a problem and that players would really want this to be solved. And then it goes from there. And then we, you know, test out our ideas and we speak to players about our ideas, and then it formulates into, you know, a proper creative vision and then a proper pitch document. And if you can clearly show that your idea is solving that problem, or your idea is fulfilling something that hasn't been invented yet, then you're onto something awesome, in my opinion.
That's awesome. And that's like basically the concept for any startup, any business.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, that's really cool. That's really cool that you guys take that approach for the, you know, for building a game. And there's a lot of, you know, if we take it to the music world, Jess, it also applies really well to the work that you do, right? Like these way of thinking, this way of approaching problems and solutions.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, like, we were working on an app a couple years ago for, we did American Girl, we did Crayola, when they were like, this is a really cool thing where like kids could get this coloring book and they could like color and then scan it, and then it actually, and the clothes would end up on like the figure. I mean, it was really, I mean, as a kid, imagine coloring your own thing and then being able to like, and you could pick different music and sound, and like, you know, we had to work really hard to figure out like you know, our job was to translate that vision into the sonic side. So we did the sound effects, sound design, and we did all the, you know, music for it, for the main app that came out for both of those. And, you know, there was a little bit of a disconnect because we'd send the sound pack and they go, that's not quite right, or this and that. And where we landed, where it finally worked, was when I called up and I said, look, because I do more of the music side and I had a partner that did more of the sound effects, and we weren't landing what they wanted. And I said, just tell me how you want to feel when there's a book reward versus a star. Because we couldn't, the rewards were where we were all struggling to be on the same page. Like, and it does just come down, like, it is vision, but by the time for me, it's music, if it's not going to have lyrics, it's feeling. If they're lyrics, it's different because then we're driving story, there's a dialogue that happens. But if it's just music to like any experience, especially interactives or games, feeling. My job is to reinforce that feeling. So, and it's, again, it is the vision of the developers at that point. Like, what is it going to feel like when you, like, you know, because there's different types of games they'd play and rewards they would get in this one instance. And yeah, and there's what's going to feel like. And then our job as the music, you know, as the sonic specialist, so to speak, is to do what we do, which is say, oh, I know how to get there. I'm going to make a jingle with like a low tom sound with this because it's going to resonate down here and it's going to have a deeper sense of gravitas to it, or it's going to be sparkly and a little bit more light and you're going to feel excited. So, you know, it's kind of fun. Like, it's fun to have to translate with expertise that you have, you know, that part of it, because it is important to tell that story. Like, you're not playing a lot of these things on mute. Like, you are, like, that whole part of the sonic experience you're having with games, with interactives, you know, with showrooms, and we've done some exhibits too, is like, it's such a big part of crafting that world that you are going to be in. So it's a fun dialogue, and you are dealing with, you speak two different languages. So you, like, you know, you have to figure out a way to get on the same page with that vision for the people who are creating that world.
Yeah, I love that you use the term feeling and fun then, because in games we use the term find the fun, find the feeling of fun. Like, that is,
Yeah.
like, when you're going through your concept phase and you're like trying to figure out what the game is, like, that is one of our core kind of checkpoints when we're making a game, is we need to find the fun. It needs to feel fun, and finding the fun is very, you know, ambiguous because it's different every time, but it's a really important part of making a game, right? Because that feeling of having fun and bringing joy is literally what you're trying to tap into. And I'm sure it's the same with music, TV, film. It's like you have to connect to that feeling that someone's having when they're playing, listening, watching. It's I think that's a really important part of creativity.
Yeah.
How do you feel like what's the importance of music for you, you know, as a gamer, game developer? What is the importance of music at Riot Games?
I mean, I think music, you know, in some of our games, it's like one of the top parts of the
I would
experience.
say even like music and sound design, right? Because
yeah, and sound design. I mean, you know, we use specifically on Forge games, which are story-driven experiences, and Jess, you know, mentioned this a couple of times, where you're telling this story. Music is an integral part of a video game, especially when it's a story-driven video game. You know, something like League of Legends, that's a competitive online experience, not so much. Sound effects are really important. Music still important, but not so much, because it distracts away from the competitive nature of the second game. But story-driven games, music is just one of the most fundamental parts. You know, you think about games like Gris or God of War, or all these games that just have amazing audio. It's Ori and the Blind Forest is just phenomenal music. And, you know, games use some exceptional composers to create music, because it's how you create immersion, it's how you create emotions. That's the really important part of music in games, is you use music to amplify the emotion you want a player to feel at certain points in the game.
That's awesome. Do you, and that's for both of you, Vaporcord and June Loban, both of them asked, what would be the best approach for people, you know, composers, artists in general, to get their music into games?
LIANNE, I'll let you go first, and then I'll give you my version of it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's all about that show reel or, you know, you're that creative talent, right? I know that takes some time to build up, but a lot of the times in games, we're looking for something very specific. So when I think about, and I think this applies to, you know, games and music, and Jess, please chime in, but I always think about, how are you going to stand out? Like, what is your uniqueness? You know, when you're just starting out in the industry, like, what makes you unique from other composers, from other game designers, from other, you know, whatever it is, you have to have that thing that makes you stand out. And that means that when someone is looking for a music for a specific type of game, if you have that thing they're looking for, then that's irreplaceable, right? Doesn't mean that you're going to work on every single game, but there is going to be a game out there that requires that unique thing that you've tapped into for your DNA.
Yeah, and I'll give like the nerdier side, since LIANNE just so accurately described the creative part. You know, like a lot of what I learned when I built my company, like, you know, it started off with me getting my stuff into things. And then why I was successful is because I knew what to take a swing at and what not to. And, you know, at this point, I would say, like, from what my experience is on my side is like why I've been able to even rise the ranks as an exec, you know, overseeing a licensing group for a publishing company, record label, a custom house, is, you know, you need, and I'm sure, like, you know, there are like LIANNE, I'm sure like you work directly with some composers, but like I have people that come to me because I have a roster of people, or I have a Rolodex. And Sound Revolver, we don't really have a roster so much as I have a Rolodex. And the way I built the company was, you tell me what you're looking for, and I could probably get those people to the table, you know, and then it does come down to taste. But, you know, I think it's, as far as getting in games in general, what my experience has been, or getting in these opportunities for custom, for all these projects in general, you know, you leverage your bets. You leverage your odds if you find an agent or a representative or a custom music house that has those opportunities and can plug you into those places. And it helps in two ways. One is, they're going to plug you into the right opportunities, and they're going to get you in front of the right people. But there's also an element of delivery, and it's so unsexy, but like, and LIANNE, I know you know this part, I know this part. Like, when I was working on this TV series, like, I was delivering 4 episodes a week. Like, I was up at 6 a.m. I had notes, so I have 4 episodes coming in at me every week, and then revision rounds, right? They don't care if I don't feel like writing that day. They don't care if I'm sick or I want to take a vacation. I knew that schedule for 6 months. It was laid out. So it's a different skill set to be able to deliver. And, you know, I know, like, I'm on the nerdy biz side as well. And I'm also very type-based. So I happen to be one of those hybrids that, like, can deliver on schedule. But, you know, I've worked with a bunch of creatives that I've gotten into amazing opportunities who aren't as organized. And it was helpful for them to have a team. Like, I'll pair them with a junior composer, or, you know, because I know the stringent you know, like, I mean, LIANNE, I'm sure you, like, explain what's it like for a composer on a game, you know, like, maybe explain like that part of it, because there's the creative, but I think, you know, it's not just the creative, the work ethic is a different beast.
Oh, I 100% agree. You know, it's like you say, like, you can be the best creative in the world. If you can't execute and deliver, then no one's going to want to work with you. You know, like, especially on something like a game, we have very specific deadlines and milestones, and you have to stick to that, because, you know, we're trying to make a game, and there's so many people involved in this process, and the wheel's turning, right? It's going, like, the train is gone, and you either have to be on that train, or you can't be part of the development. So I 100% agree with you, Jess. Like, execution is so important. And I know so many creatives that are just phenomenal, but they just cannot deliver. And that, it will be the downfall of your career, because you have to be reliable, and you have to, you know, work with integrity and deliver when you say you're going to deliver. And, you know, I think in games, you know, we definitely give people some flexibility, because creativity is hard and it takes time and it takes iteration, but you still have to be, you know, be on that schedule. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and be willing to kill your babies a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, we were working on a Revolver ad a couple years ago, and they wanted, like, I forget the name of the artist, but I used to tour, so my Rolodex is a bunch of touring musicians. So when they're like, we want something that sounds like this, and I'm like, I know the guitar player for that band, and I knew it was going to be a little bit of a nightmare for me, because he's so artist driven that when he dug in, he did a great job on this adaptation, and then the director wanted to hear the claps in a different verse, and he called me. He's like, I won't do it, it's stupid. And we had to have this, like, therapy session where I was like, here's what's going to happen. We're going to go back to the original version, but there's 4 people there that have to have opinions and you have to be at peace. I'm like, move the claps. Sorry, you have to do it. Like, trust me. So, you know, and he did it begrudgingly. It's the dumbest thing ever. And, you know, I was like, sure. But again, you know, we're hiring you to do this for these people. So, you know, that's the execution. And then the notes, it's, you know, and of course they did go back to the version we all loved, but part of this process, and this does touch upon what we talked about earlier with like even the entrepreneurism, is like, it's making mistakes, or it's allowing other people to make mistakes because they might not know what they want till they hear it, and they might change their mind and go back. And that's the tough skin you have to have. And I said earlier, but the humor, I think, like, because you're just like, at some point, I don't know how many notes, LIANNE, if you've been this, but I've been on projects where it just like goes in so many circles that you're just like, I don't even know what this sounds like anymore. Like, who's making a note, and like, so you feel like someone's wife coughs in the next room and like they change their mind, and you're like, sure, we'll change those lyrics again, no problem. Sounds like a great idea. So you have to have humor, or you do get angry or resentful and you feel annoyed. But you know, it's art. It's art, and it's art and media. It's not just art. Your own art is your own thing. You can be upset about that, but this is art and media in a collaborative process that's somewhat ridiculous and cool when you get paid.
That's awesome. And again, I think in that process, you were 100% serving a vision, right? It's not your vision, it's the vision of a client, of a team, and that's what it is. It's work for, it's like a painter, right? He comes and he's going to paint your walls, he's going to serve your vision, your colors, you know, and so forth. There's one very specific question for let's see here. It's from Magali Madariaga, I guess. How do you envision Riot developing more licensing and partnership opportunities that are more appealing to reach younger generations?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that as part of the Riot Forward strategy, you know, we want to reach new and different audiences. Some of the games that we're making on Forge are more specifically for different demographics, like different age groups, different gender groups, different regions, different places in the world, different cultures. And so that's a really big part of the Riot Forward strategy. Riot Games as a whole, I mean, as you know, our vision is very much competitive multiplayer games. Like, that's what we're very, very good at inside of Riot. Like, that's our special sauce. And with that type of experience comes a certain player, you know, that is a very specific type of player in a very specific type of demographic. So we will continue to make great games in that space, because that is literally what Riot is the best at. But from a Riot Forge perspective, working with third-party developers, we're definitely branching out into different audience types and different types of players in the games that we're making.
That's awesome. Cool. Also learning a lot about gaming today. That's cool.
Yeah.
There were a lot of questions about, and I guess Jess already touched a little bit on every aspect of how to get your music in front of music supervisors. There's a bunch here. How do you get your music in front of music supervisors? When looking for new musicians or composers to work with, how do you find them? Is it just through agents? Do you keep an eye out through networking as well? There's a few of those. So
yeah, of course. So you have to keep in mind how inundated music supervisors are. And this is where you shouldn't get discouraged. They get so many emails. They get emails from record labels, publishers, agents, people they want to get music from. And then they get emails from people that they just don't have time to listen to things. And I say don't have time because everyone wants to discover cool new stuff. That their job is to find cool new stuff that's going to work specifically on their projects. So I will say, like, you know, I got started by finding the agents that rep the music that was close to my styles. And then when I had other side band projects, I branched out and had those agents rep me. And then when I kind of graduated in my business to kind of where I'm at, where now I have these direct relationships with supervisors and I represent a bunch of content, it's a little bit different. But I'd say find agents that represent what you do well, offer them a project, see if they're interested in. That's the best kind of, like, I would say, like, gateway, you know, to get in.
When would you say it's the best time to approach an agent? That's actually a question from Luke Truan.
Yeah, your music has to be broadcast quality. I cannot do anything with music that is not broadcast quality. You give me a work tape demo that's not quite there. You know, you get one shot to have me listen to something. Attachments are not great. Links are awesome. Lengthy emails about the history of your career. Again, not personal. It's just inundated with so many emails. I get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. So I'm scrolling through and like, you know, and that also does kind of go to the other end, which you asked, how do I find new talent? Because I'm always looking for new talent because projects vary, right? And I always, and again, it's like what LIANNE and I talked about too, like I want to make sure that I'm always giving new people a shot, but also people that are representative of, you know, not just a certain demographic that tends to make up the people that I hire. What we do, at least what I do, is anything that comes in, I forward it. If it comes to me or it goes to my assistant, we forward it and we put everything on a spreadsheet, and we do our best once a week to have an A&R listening. And I say my best because my priority is to service the artists and the clients that we have. So we spend a lot of our time, you know, trying to like make sure that we're getting new business, that we have stuff rolling in, that we're satisfying all the briefs for the shows and commercials and ads and all the projects that we have. And, you know, when we do our A&R listening, we go through, and if it's something we think we can use, we'll reach back out and we sign a bunch of people. But for me, we only sign people that we know we can work with, meaning that it has to be something that we don't have a lot of, that we get asked for a lot. I don't just like to sign by volume because I don't want people disappointed in their results. When it comes to creatives, producers, and writers, like, you know, that's a little trickier because the stakes are so high when I'm hiring a composer or a producer on a project, that it is a little easier if someone recommends you, but I still listen all the time. And if I think I can use it, I'll give someone a crack maybe at a project and say, hey, do you want to take a crack at this prompt? Let me just see how you work to notes. So you know, there are a bunch of people like me. So like, yeah, agents, and like I do a little bit of research with like, you know, sync teams or custom houses, you know, that like you feel like are already doing the projects that you're good at, or you might think that you're good at. And you know, that I always feel like that's the best way in, because a lot of these supervisors, like I said, they're just inundated, they don't have the time, and they're going to go to tastemakers like me. And here's the unsexy part, is there's a whole other side of rights to your music. I don't know how many people are watching know about rights and publishing and masters and sound recording, and it's not sexy, it's not fun, but a supervisor ultimately needs to contract your work, which means that as cool as the music is, they need to be able to do a contract with you to put it up in whatever project they're in. And that's why they prefer to not go directly with artists, composers, because I don't know how many of you know contract law. I don't know how many of you know how to negotiate your own fees. I don't know how many of you do split sheets, like, and they don't know that either. So it's also, even if you get in directly with them, they're still going to be a little hesitant because they're not going to know if they can actually contract that song. So, so it sounds like there are gatekeepers, and there is a little bit, but it is to your benefit to have people who believe in you, who know this other part of it, that have access to a bunch of opportunities. And you know, like I said, like that's what we do, at least on the licensing side. And I have a hot list. On my hot list, I go through, and again, I don't submit every job to every composer. Something comes in and I'm like, I know the guy that I had do Westworld for me and these 3 other things is going to nail this project, and I send that email to like those 2 or 3 people. So you know, it's helpful to start to get on those lists with people that, you know, again, you can do a little Google research, find, you know, see what their projects are, and then when you email them, say, I think I'd be great because this is my style, and give one link with not a billion songs, but your 2 or 3 top aces. Like a gun is to your head, they're going to shoot you. What's your best thing? Aces. That's it. Make it simple.
Beautiful. LIANNE, do you guys have something similar in your field? Like, do you get like a lot of, like, let's say indie developers trying to sell their games, their ideas?
Yes.
To, how does it work?
Yes. It's much like Jess was saying, to be honest. You know, I get inundated with emails from developers. You know, can you take a look at our game? Can you take a look at our pitch doc? You know, we're looking for a publisher. Can we set up some time to talk? And I think the thing that's really challenging is just the pure volume of that, right? I get a lot, so it's very, very hard to look through all of them all of the time. So what I always say to people is, when you're messaging me, give me the thing that's making you stand out. You know, like Jess is saying, but it's very simple. You know, send me the pitch doc and connect that back to what I'm doing. You know, the amount of times I get pitches for multiplayer games, and to me that is just back to one of Jess's earlier points of like, they didn't do the research. You know, if you're gonna contact someone, make sure you do the research on that person and that company and what they're doing, because if you send them a pitch for something that's just like not even in their wheelhouse, like that just doesn't show very good prep work to me. So, you know, when I do get pitches for multiplayer games or like free to play games, all you have to do is look on my LinkedIn, and then the like website that's linked in my LinkedIn, and it says we're making single player story driven games. So don't send me a multiplayer pitch, because I'm probably not going to be able to do anything with that. So I do think if you're going to connect people, especially on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has definitely become like a free-for-all and there's a lot of messages flying around. If you're going to do that, tailor your communication, know the person that you're contacting, provide them with the thing that is unique to you. Here's my pitch for a single player game. I saw that Forge is doing these. Could you take a look, you know? And just be very specific about what you're looking for as well. You know, the amount of messages I get that's kind of like, hey, can we just jump on a call? I'm like, I would love to jump on a call with everybody that messages me, but I literally cannot, because I would never have time to do my job.
Yes.
So, you know, just be specific. Like, do you want to talk about a game idea? Do you want to talk about mentorship? What is it that you're looking for from me? Because that will really help me let you know. And I know sometimes it's really scary to be open and transparent about what you're looking for, but it's better to do that than waste time jumping on a call and then, you know, taking this person's time for them to just say, sorry, like this isn't a good fit, because that's not beneficial for either of you, right? That's not a network connection that's really going to be that beneficial for you. So we get it a lot. There is an official process, like you can go on the Forge website and submit pitches there. You can message me, but be very specific. Do your research, be specific. And to Jess's point, be simple. Like, link me the thing. Don't link me like this whole entire portfolio of all the work you've ever done. Because honestly, that just, I just turn off from that, because I'm like, I haven't got time to look through all those, you know, 60 links that you just sent. So yeah, very similar process.
That's cool. There were also a few questions. There was one that was really interesting, and I guess it links back to my first question. What inspires you to do what you do? If there's one thing.
I just, you know, I personally love seeing that thing come together at the end, like, and seeing people enjoy it. You know, the thing that inspires me every day is when you have a vision and the team work cohesively together on that vision, and then out comes at the other end this like whole entire game, and you're like, holy crap, how did we even make this? Where did this come from? You know, and all this like blood, sweat and tears that you go through, you know, making games. I say this because sometimes people think it's, you know, a job where you just sit and play games all day. It's really hard. Making games is really hard. You know, it's a very difficult process. It's very creative. It's full of a lot of feedback, as we've talked about. It's a lot of long hours. You have to be really passionate about what you're doing. But the thing that inspires me every day is when we get to that point where we have an amazing game and we sit down as a team and all play it and we're like, fuck yeah, like this is going to be awesome. And then, you know, you finally launch that game and players love it. Like, that's it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I would say what inspires me is like, I've just always, I mean, I was a musician since I could touch a keyboard or play, you know, I always wanted to play. I always wanted to hear different things and then hear what other people are doing and then play music with them. And, you know, like, you know, and Leanne touched on this like briefly earlier about like, you know, maybe escaping a little bit from your world. Like, same for me, like music helped me say the things I couldn't say when I was younger. And it's this unspoken language that like, I feel like has been so much fun to be able to see how far that goes. So a lot of it is that. The other half of it for me, honestly, with Sound Revolver and the rest of it is I want to help my friends. I have talented, amazing friends. And, you know, one of my Spidey strengths on top of being creative has always been to kind of find these cool opportunities and to make those connections and those links. And I feel so great when like you know, I hired a friend on a project who'd never scored a series before, but I knew he could do it. And I wouldn't, you know, I had him test on this project, and, you know, he called me panicking the night before the test was due and was like, why did you think I could do this? And I was like, do I strike you as someone who would mess up this relationship with my client? I was like, trust me, I know you can do this. And he nailed the project, and I got him the support that he needed. I knew he needed a junior composer under him. I had an assistant that helped him do cue sheets because he hadn't done them before, but I knew his work ethic. I knew that he had the sound that they wanted, and I knew he just didn't entirely know the language. So the other part of what drives me is being able to give access to creatives, like, kind of translate. It's the same thing. I think it's the translation of this emotion and story. And then it is bringing my amazing creative family that I have just been embraced by through decades of a career. And, you know, I have friends who are off tour who are the most talented people on the planet who don't know how to get their own work. And when I can call them up and, like, you know, I have a friend who's like, oh yeah, I was able to buy a house with this, or I just had a baby, like, that to me is also part of it. Like, it feels so great to, like, be able to take this thing that we all do because we love so much, and to help my friends and talented people that I love be able to make a living doing it, or at least stretch it a little bit further so they can continue to create. And that to me is super exciting. And that to me is what makes the part of the business that is kind of boring. Like, you guys all get to play around, and then I sometimes don't have time to do as much of the creative, and I'm like, oh man, like, they're playing in the studio, like, I want to be playing in the studio. But the passion and the drive for me is also, like, then seeing, like, you know, all these contracts with my friends and being like, okay, well, that makes it worth it. And I was still creatively involved in that project by putting those pieces together and by making sure they were treated fairly and that they had an opportunity they wouldn't have had. So that to me is, like, become, in the last, I'd say, 10 years of my career, also just as rewarding as me doing the fun stuff myself.
That's really exciting. That's really cool. All right, so we are approaching the end of our conversation. I'll just, like, maybe a couple more questions just to kind of wrap up. One for Jess, one for LIANNE. And I actually recorded a video, you know, inviting people to join these conversation. And I think I did a couple of videos, and I pronounced your name in a different, in a Brazilian way. I would say, like, LIANNE LOOMBE. How do you pronounce your last name?
Loom. It's a silent B.
Okay, Loom.
But it's fine. I've had all sorts, so I'm not offended in any way, shape, or form. I've had lots of different pronunciations.
That's cool. All right. So, last question from Luke. If someone has a well-developed story and illustration, would Riot consider creating a game based on that information, or would the game need to be developed first and then pitched?
So we have a couple of different avenues. For Riot, we do only work in our IP. So it is League of Legends, it is Valorant. So, you know, pitching a game that isn't our IP is not something that Riot does right now. We do have another program called Earth, which is underrepresented funding. And that is an investment arm within Riot that invests in underrepresented developers. And that does not have to be the League IP. So there is a process there if the development team is of, you know, minorities and diversities, then we are looking to raise up those developers at the moment with funding. So that's one thing that exists at Riot, and the other piece is Forge, but Forge is League of Legends games only. And so if it was a different IP, that would obviously not be something that Riot is looking at, but League of Legends for sure.
Beautiful. And Jess, there's so many music related questions here. Is there any current trend that you see in sync and licensing, like things that companies are, you know, in high, like, demanding? What else is here? And if you feel it's important for the music to be released or unreleased for you to pitch, for you to work with these artists?
Supervisors tend to like stuff that's not released. A lot of times we'll have really great stuff, but a hit show will be out and they'll say, hey, if it's released even like a year ago, we're not interested in it. They want to break new artists. So that is a bit of a bummer. A cool hack around that is I have a bunch of side projects that I just pitch. And when the minute I landed a show, I'm like, cool, we're releasing it now. They don't need to know that I wrote it 5-6 years ago. So if you don't have to put it out, I would say maybe let an agent work it for a minute. or a certain length of time before you put it out so that it is still relevant in those timetables. So, you know, again, broadcast quality, not demos, like broadcast syncable. You can see it on TV, hear it on the radio quality, you know, I'd say is the best thing. As far as like trends go, I mean, there's a lot of research you guys can do. Like there's a site called TuneFind, which is great. You can look it up and you can look up your favorite shows and they'll show you the songs that are in them, a lot of them. This is the research part that we both keep mentioning. You can see what's trending on those shows because it is across the board. You wouldn't believe the wide range of music requests I get, from documentaries to like find, you know, your niche. Like if it's sports promos, it's going to be a BPM that's a little bit higher. There are overall things that you see trending. Like I'd say any mashup of different styles for promos that are upbeat, like it's always going to kind of land. Lately, soul and funk has been having a little bit of a revival in the ad planet. But you can also look up iSpot. That's another great hack of a website where you can look up the commercials and the brands. So if you think like, oh, I think this would be great for this brand, you can actually look and you can listen and watch the commercial and hear the music that's on it. So, you know, I would just say, like, if you're interested in it, like, keep your ears to the ground. If you hear it, you're hearing the same things I'm hearing, you know? You're listening to the radio, you're watching TV. Don't fast forward through the commercials if you want your music on ads, you know? Like, whenever I'm at my parents' house and they still broadcast TV, like, I sit there and watch the commercials and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I don't watch commercials at home, really. I have, like, Netflix and Hulu, but I just soak it up and I'm like, oh, that's what got that national ad. That's really interesting, you know? So just listen, and then do a little bit of research. And, you know, again, if you're that style, you'd be surprised. I mean, we have such a wide range of things we get asked for, which is why we're always signing new stuff. Like there's a little niche everywhere in the planet, you know? One thing I will say, if you're doing lyrical content is, and this is really important if you're a songwriter, remember, this is around dialogue. So everybody wants the end montage scene where your beautiful lyrics and it's just pictures in the background. It's that Grey's Anatomy spot and your beautiful voice lilting, you know, over everything. But 99% of what we license is between dialogue, under dialogue. So if you are going to write things with lyrics and you want to get into TV and film and even ads, I would say sparse lyrics, one theme. And again, like we talked about this a lot, what is your vibe and emotion? Don't be tricky with it. Is it happiness? Lyrics should don't be ironic. The lyrics should be happy. The tone should be happy. Is it sadness? Kind of stick to that vibe. And again, keep it sparse. Imagine that there's enough space to wrap around. Remember, collaborate. It's a collaborative process, even if you're licensing and it's a pre-existing song. The things that get licensed the most are very simple. Super, super, super simple.
That's awesome. A lot of information. And you touched on something that's really cool. And I think it's cool to hear from you too, LOOMBE.
No, it's Silent B.
She mentioned, you know, she touched on like research. She goes to her parents' place to watch commercials. And that's a way of, you know, doing a little research and being updated. Do you, how do you guys go about it at Riot Games? Like, do the developers, do you have like a section where people play other companies' games? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, competitive analysis is a huge part of our job, especially for me as a producer. That's something that the producers own. So we, you know, are experts in our area, you know. So for example, if we're making a RPG, then one of the first things we'll do is go and play like every single RPG that's come out in the last, you know, 12 to 18 months, because we want to see what the latest trends are. We want to see what they did well, what they didn't do well, what players have said about the game is very, very important. So lots of research around playing those particular genres or subgenres that are close. And then competitive analysis is something that is a really important part of our business, because we have to look at who's done something similar in this space before and where did they excel and maybe where did they miss an opportunity. And we can use that to really make sure that we're finding a spot in the market based on what players are looking for. You know, if we look at the last, you know, 5 RPGs and we can see a similar theme of players asking for more crafting, for example, or maybe the dialogue hasn't been as good enough in the last 5 RPGs that have existed. Well, that's probably a really clear opportunity for us to be really great at dialogue and really great at crafting. And then we're fulfilling that space that players are saying, hey, I just really want an RPG that's got great dialogue, that's got great crafting. It's like, yep, we're going to do that for you. So that research and that analysis is extremely important, and producers like myself are accountable for making sure that the team have access to that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you so much, Loombe.
Thank you.
Before we finish, I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to share my screen again, and it's going to be really quick. Just a quick reminder, you know, reach out to these girls online, look them up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. They're there. If you feel like getting involved somehow with Music Cosmos, you can volunteer, offer giveaways, and there's a few other things that you can do to support. And I usually also like, you know, ending our conversations with a showcase. You know, before the pandemic, we used to gather in a physical space with a lot of people, with singer-songwriters sharing their music, sharing their you know, their passion with an audience. And I love bringing, you know, those old videos from far distant past, so we can like end these gatherings with a little bit of music. So if you're there, if you feel free to stay and, you know, listen and watch. Feel free to leave as well if you want to leave the room. Thank you again, Jess. Really appreciate your time, all your knowledge. Loombe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Nice
now
to
we're
meet you,
gonna
LIANNE.
Yeah, lovely to meet you, Jess.
we're gonna listen to a really beautiful, badass singer-songwriter from LA.